In today's gospel, Jesus says, "My sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me." But the people who questioned Jesus in the gospel could not understand him. Why? Because they were not part of his flock. And Jesus explains this using a simple image. In Israel, different flocks of sheep could mix together. But when the shepherds call them, only his sheep responds. Kinaya sa mga karnero nga makaila sa tingog sa ilang magbalantay. The sheep will recognize the voice and they follow. Mausab kini ang pasabot ni Jesus that if we truly belong to him, we will recognize his voice. So the question for us is, if we are his sheep, why is it hard for us to hear him? The problem is not that Jesus has stopped speaking. The problem is that our world is too loud. A spiritual writer once said that if you cannot hear the voice of God, you have to turn down the world's volume. And this is true. Why is it so difficult nowadays to hear the voice of God? Because the world has become too noisy. Saba na kaayo ang kalibutan nato karon. Every day, we are surrounded by noise, especially from our gadgets. Not only that, by what is happening around us. Notifications, messages, endless scrolling. And when we fill our time with all of these, we slowly lose our time for silence, for prayer, for God. And another kind of noise comes from what we watch and listen to. Anger, gossip, greed, worldly desires. And without noticing it, mas madungog pa nato ang tingog sa kalibutan kaysa tingog sa Ginoo. And when the sheep can no longer hear the shepherd, they get lost. That is why today Jesus invites us to listen once again. In the first reading, the early Christians listened to the word and lived it. Their lives were transformed. That is why they were called Christians. Not only because they are followers of Jesus, but because people could see Christ in them. And today, being the second day of Novena in honor of Saint Dominic Savio, we can have a beautiful example in his life. That even as a young boy, he knew how to listen to the Good Shepherd. Before entering the oratory of St. John Bosco, he would begin his day with prayer and the Holy Mass. He spent time in silence and listened attentively to the Word of God. And at one point, Dominic practiced very harsh penances. But Don Bosco told him to stop and instead focus on doing his ordinary duties very well. And Dominic listened. And because he listened, he grew in true holiness. Not in extraordinary things, but in faithful love in daily life. Brothers and sisters, the Good Shepherd is still speaking to us today. We hear his voice in the Word of God proclaimed in the Mass. We hear his voice in our conscience. But we can only recognize his voice if we make space for him. So today, the invitation is simple. We have to turn down the other voices that distract us from listening to the voice of the Good Shepherd. Find a few minutes each day for silence. Pray, listen, and let the Word of God enter our hearts. And in this Eucharist, we ask the Lord, through the intercession of Saint Dominic Savio, to help us to hear the voice of the Good Shepherd despite the noise around us. My sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me. May we listen, may we follow Jesus, and may we never get lost.